Looking for a roof rack for your Jeep? Here's what I went with, here's why I went with it, and here's what I think about it so far. Hello everyone, welcome back to Holland Vols Adventures. I am driving down River Road in near Tellico Plains. Done a little bit more exploring today, try to find some new camping areas, and basically wasting time today because I decided to take the afternoon off work, which I don't do often. And even though it's kind of a rainy, nasty day, I enjoy spending time up in the mountains on days like this. There's not a lot of traffic, and you know what? It's just as pretty as any other day. But as I'm driving back, I thought I would share a little bit about my Teraflex Nebo Roof Rack that I installed on the JK a couple of months ago. To start with, I had considered a lot of different options, and honestly, I mean, if you know Jeeps, there's never a shortage of options when it comes to accessories. Your basic roof rack types that you can put on these things, there's obviously, if you've got a hardtop, you've got just your regular gutter mount crossbars, which I've used on this Jeep. I've used that to when I used our Yakima Skybox when we travel and things. You've got the exo cage type racks, which mount usually to the windshield frame and then somewhere back behind the rear bumper. And then you've got a couple of newer options. One of them that I considered heavily is the Rhino Rack backbone system, which is basically an internal cage that mounts to the hardtop and then mounts to mounting plates on top of the top, and then their rack system mounts to that. I almost pulled the trigger on that rack. I came really close, but it's expensive, and I mean really expensive. The rack that I would have gone with the 3 crossbars and the internal backbone system, I was probably looking at somewhere around $1,200, which I was having a hard time stomaching. And then the last option I looked at that ultimately went with was the Teraflex Nebo. So the things that I wanted out of a rack, I wanted something that would carry a lot more weight than the gutters allowed for, with the intent of maybe using a rooftop tent of some sort at some point. I am in the beginning stages of planning some type of excursion up to Alaska with the Jeep. Obviously looking a couple, 3 years off. I'm going to save some money and do some planning, but if I do that, I'm probably going to go with a rooftop tent on that trip. So that was one of the biggest things I was looking for, is weight carrying capacity, both static and dynamic. The other thing is I didn't really want a noisy rack. While the exoskeleton type racks can hold a lot of weight, over time they squeak and rattle. There's a lot of wind noise with them, and I didn't really want that. I wanted something fairly low profile, and I wanted something that gave me some flexibility as far as where I mount my crossbars, distances, position, things like that. Which was another reason I decided not to go with the Rhino rack. While I liked it, I liked the way it installed, you're stuck with the 3 positions of crossbars that they provide. There's one that basically goes just behind the driver's seat, and then there's one on either side of the rear window. So you're kind of stuck with those 3 positions. The Teraflex rack to me, looks a little bit more like something that would be offered from the factory. It looks just like a simple rail that goes from front to back, which to me gives you a lot of different options on where you're going to mount your crossbars, the distances, trying to center things onto the roof, that sort of thing. It also can carry quite a bit of weight, and off the top of my head I don't remember what that was, but I'll put that somewhere here in the video, both static and dynamic. It's a little bit more involved than the Rhino rack as far as installation. Initially it's a bit daunting, and I'm not going to go into how you install this rack. There is a fantastic video that Teraflex has out there that walks you step by step through the installation of that rack, and it's a lot. If you are not somebody that is familiar with hand tools, you probably want to pay somebody to do it. If you have experience installing things, then I say go for it. You know, if you know how to use a drill, if you know how to use a measuring tape, if you've got some moderate ability with hand tools, you should be fine. You just want to take your time. The other thing I want to warn you on is making sure that everything is in the box when you get the rack. A lot of times when guys install things, we just pull it out of the box and go to slap it on. I cannot stress enough to make sure that you have every single little bitty nut, bolt, part, everything. And I would also go as far as making sure you have both a left and a right rail before you start the installation. Super long story short, I got sent 2 passenger side rails, and I was in a pinch. I was doing it on a Sunday. I had to be on the road on Monday. I could not afford to wait with my top off my Jeep for a few days while Teraflex sent me a new rail. So actually a buddy of mine went to his shop with his drill press, and we made a left-hand rail out of the passenger side rail. So with that said, make sure you have every single part before you get started. There's a lot of parts, and unfortunately they don't really give you any extras. You want to make sure you've got all the gaskets, all the O-rings, all the bolts, nuts, etc., everything that you need to install that sucker before you take your top off. With that said, measuring is key. Make sure you measure everything 4 times. You know, they say measure twice, cut once. Measure it as many times as you feel comfortable with. But you know, like I said, start to finish, it was a fairly straightforward installation. The instructions are good, the video is even better, and if you have, you know, a decent ability with hand tools, you should have no problem. Which isn't to say the Rhino rack is not a great option as well. If you're happy with the 3 positions the rack gives you, or you're looking to even spend more money and go with their platform roof, it's a fantastic option. The nice thing about the Rhino rack is once it's installed on the hardtop, it does not take any additional time, effort, or anything to remove the hardtop. With the Teraflex, there are 4 additional bolts that you have to remove in order to take the hardtop off. They give you a special tool. It's really simple. It's not like it takes a lot of effort and work to do it. It's just 4 extra bolts on top of the myriad of bolts you already have to take out of the top. So again, keep that in mind as you're shopping. Outside of that, the weight carrying ability of both the racks is pretty similar, and so then it really comes down to aesthetics. You know, with my rack, I actually use a set of Thule, I think they're called Crossroads feet and Thule square bars that I can mount at any point along that rack, which has worked well for me. You know, for what I use it for so far, which honestly hasn't been a whole lot yet, but we're just now getting into the season for camping and stuff, so I'm sure it'll get a lot more use than it's gotten so far. As far as the fit and finish of it, I would say it's excellent. You can tell Teraflex put a lot of engineering into this rack. It shows with the number of parts that goes into putting this thing together, and it all works. You know, all the little O-rings, all the gaskets, everything works. I did have a leak after I installed it, but that was my fault. I forgot to snug down the front driver's side section, and so it was just a little bit loose, which was just enough to let some water through, and I had a little bit of a leak. Once I got that tightened back up, it's been leak free since I installed it, and we've had a ton of rain in East Tennessee since I did the installation. It's rattle free, no rattles whatsoever, and as far as wind noise, I can't hear anything above my normal BFG mud terrain road whine. So from that standpoint, I'm super happy with my choice. I've got a friend that has the Rhino rack, and again, he hasn't really reported any bad wind noise. Although, anytime you put crossbars on a vehicle, you're going to get some wind noise. One thing I do that a friend of mine told me a long time ago is I take a bungee cord and I wrap it around the front bar, and that disrupts the wind enough where it doesn't really make that howling, whistling sound. So a little tip for you there. You know, the rack does mount internally to your sport cage in the Jeep. There's brackets that go on the back overhead bar. There's brackets that install on the front overhead bar over the sound bar. You get everything lined up, but again, the directions are really easy to follow. Once you get it all lined up, you snug things down and get all the rack put on the hardtop, and it's like I said, the engineering that went into this thing's pretty impressive. Tell you what, how about I pull over just for a second, I'll show you a couple of the components, and you can kind of see what's going on with this thing. Hopefully you can hear good enough. I've got a little bit of a rushing river behind me, so this right here is the area that I hadn't snugged down well enough that actually leaked a little bit, but once I got that tightened down, it works great. So this part here, there's a bolt that comes through here and mounts down into the sport bar, and then back here as well, there's a bolt that comes through here and mounts into the sport bar. And the brackets, sorry about that, there's the brackets there, and they mount to the roll bar, or I'm sorry, sport bar as Jeep likes to call it. And there's the other bracket, and the two in the front are similar. They just mount on top of that front bar. And they give you a little tool that mounts those bolts. You can see it's got T-nut slots, top and on inside, that you can use Teraflex's crossbars with, which I decided not to go with that because I like my bars better. I think it's a good looking rack. So I think it's got pretty good lines that match a little bit what I think the factory would have been. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of how it looks and how it works. So I mentioned a little bit about not going with the Teraflex crossbars. They call them slats, I think. They're basically a series of, I think, 6 slats that slide in using T-nuts that serve as almost like a little platform. The problem for me is it's actually sunken down. They mount them lower. And so for a lot of the stuff I'm going to use on this rack, they weren't really going to be useful to me. Plus they're expensive. The slats alone are over $500. So I decided to forego those and just use my Yakima and Thule stuff, which has served me well for a lot of years. And I have a ton of it laying around, so I'd rather put that to use than spend more money. I want to say I got a discount coupon that I picked this rack up, what you see without the cross slats. I think I picked it up for about $550 delivered. So roughly, over half of what the Rhino rack would have cost me. When you compare it to some of the exoskeleton type racks, it's probably in line with some of the cheaper ones, but again, cheaper is not better in the rack world. I think there's Garvin and some of those that make the more expensive, better exoskeleton type racks. I mean, you're looking $1,500 for one of those things typically, once you add some options to it and get it delivered. So overall, top to bottom, I would say I'm so far very happy with my Teraflex Nebo rack. As I mentioned in previous videos, I don't get paid for this stuff, folks. I'm not advertising. I didn't get this thing for free in hopes of, giving them a good review. I buy my stuff with my own money. I use it. If I like it, I'll let you know. If I don't like it, I'll let you know. I'll touch base as I put it to use more over the coming years. And if I end up not liking it, I'll tell you. But I tend to really do a lot of research before I put something on one of my Jeeps. So hopefully I've made the right decision with the Teraflex. I've had stuff of theirs in the past that's held up well. In fact, I have a set of 1-inch pucks in the front of the Jeep right now on this one. But I've had stuff going back to really when they first started out on my TJs and things. So hope you guys enjoyed that short review. If you have any questions, shoot them to me. Like, subscribe, all that jazz. And hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining Holland Balls and Ventures.